When did you realize your parents were bad at parenting? When I was 11, my mother used to drop me off at the local mall every weekend with 15 euros and her credit card for emergencies. She called it our arrangement. At the time, it sounded exciting, almost grown up. Most kids had to beg their parents for freedom. Most of my friends couldn't even walk to the corner store alone. Meanwhile, I was being dropped off at one of the biggest shopping centers in the city with money in my pocket and an entire day to do whatever I wanted. You're mature for your age, Mom always said. You can handle it. When you're 11 years old, being called mature feels like a compliment. It makes you feel special, chosen, important. I didn't realize until years later that sometimes adults call children mature because they're expecting them to carry responsibilities they shouldn't have to carry. The first weekend felt amazing. Mom pulled up outside the mall entrance around 10 in the morning. She handed me 15 euros, gave me her emergency credit card, then smiled. Text me every few hours. Okay, I'll be back around 8. Okay, she kissed my forehead, then drove away. I remember standing there watching her car disappear into traffic. For a second, I felt nervous. Then the automatic doors slid open, and suddenly I had an entire mall to explore. Back then, it felt like paradise. The food court smelled like pizza and cinnamon rolls. The arcade lights flashed endlessly. The electronics stores had gaming demos. The bookstores had comfortable chairs where nobody bothered you if you pretended to read. I spent hours wandering around. I learned quickly how to stretch 15 euros. A soda could last half the afternoon. Free samples became an art form. The pizza place gave out huge slices if you showed up right before lunch. The Chinese restaurant handed out chicken samples every 30 minutes. The bakery always had leftover pastries near closing time. Within weeks, I knew the mall better than some employees. I knew which bathrooms were always clean, which benches had outlets nearby, which security guards were friendly, which stores didn't mind kids hanging around. One employee in particular started noticing me. His name was Matteo. He worked at GameStop. He looked like a college student, maybe 20 or 21. The first time he talked to me, I had been standing near a demo console for almost an hour. Back again, little man? I laughed. Maybe, you're gonna beat my high score eventually. From then on, he'd always say hello whenever I came in. Sometimes he'd tell me about upcoming games. Sometimes he'd let me stay on the display consoles longer than other kids. At the time, I thought he was just being nice. Now I realize he was probably wondering why the same 11-year-old spent every Saturday alone. By the fourth weekend, I had developed a routine. Arrive at 10. Walk through every floor. Check the gaming stores. Grab lunch. Watch people. Wait. Most kids dream about freedom. What nobody tells you is that freedom gets lonely, especially when you're 11. At first, I loved seeing families everywhere. Parents shopping with their kids, brothers arguing over toys, teenagers embarrassing their mothers. But after a while, I started noticing something. Nobody else was alone. Not really. Everywhere I looked, people belonged to someone. Meanwhile, I was spending entire weekends pretending not to care. Mom rarely answered my texts. I'd send messages like, "Had lunch," no response. "Watching a movie," no response. "Bought a new game," nothing. Then, hours later, "Great. See you tonight." It felt normal back then. Now it feels heartbreaking. An older security guard named Mr. Ram N eventually started paying attention too. He was probably in his 60s. Tall, gray hair, permanent frown. At first he intimidated me. Then I realized he was actually one of the nicest people in the building. One rainy Saturday, the mall was nearly empty. I was sitting alone in the food court picking at cold fries. Mr. Ram N sat across from me. "Where are your parents?" "My mom's working." "Nearby?" I nodded, then repeated the exact line Mom had taught me. "She's in important meetings." I'm old enough to handle myself. I still remember the look on his face. Not anger, not disbelief. Sadness. Like he'd heard that explanation before. After a moment, he pushed his pretzel toward me. "My shift ends soon. I'm okay. I never finished these." I took it. Looking back, I think he knew I was hungry. What started as occasional Saturdays became every weekend. Then Friday nights. Then entire weekends. Sometimes Mom would drop me off Friday evening. Other times she'd send a text. "Can you grab dinner at the mall?" Use the emergency card, or "running late." Stay there a little longer. A little longer often meant hours. I learned how to blend in. I'd buy a movie ticket and sit alone. I'd intentionally sit between families so nobody would notice I had come by myself. One night, during an animated movie, a father sitting next to me offered me popcorn. "You can have some." I smiled politely, but for some reason, my throat tightened. Because for a brief moment, it felt like someone was looking after me, even if it was just a stranger sharing popcorn. The worst weekend happened 6 months later. I bought discounted sushi from a kiosk right before closing. It tasted slightly off, but I was hungry. By midnight, I was violently sick. I barely made it to the bathroom. I spent hours curled up on the floor between vomiting and crying. Eventually, a woman heard me. She called security. The next thing I remember was Mr. Ram N kneeling beside me. "Hey kid." I looked up. My face was covered in tears. My clothes were a mess. I felt horrible. "Where's your mom?" I couldn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. Security brought me to their office. They gave me water, blankets, medicine. Then they started calling her. Again, and again, and again. 17 calls. No answer. Hours passed. Morning came. Still nothing. Eventually, they reached her. I remember hearing part of the conversation. "Your son is sick." Pause. "He's been here all night." Another pause. Then Mr. Ramen's expression changed. His jaw tightened. The room became silent. After hanging up, he muttered something under his breath. Years later, I learned what she'd said. "Can't he just Uber home?" Not, "Is he okay?" Not, "Does he need a hospital?" Not, "Put him on the phone." Just, "Can't he Uber home?" An 11-year-old, alone, sick, after spending the night on a security office couch. That was the moment everything changed, because by then, the mall employees had started comparing notes. Mateo remembered seeing me every weekend. Restaurant workers remembered me eating alone. Security officers remembered seeing me from opening until closing. The mall manager decided to review footage. What they found shocked even them. Camera after camera showed the same thing. Me arriving alone. Me wandering alone. Me eating alone. Me leaving alone. For 6 consecutive weekends. Sometimes longer. Mr. Raman watched the footage beside the manager. Years later, he admitted it made him furious. Not because I was there, because nobody had noticed sooner. When Mom finally arrived the following morning, she walked into the security office carrying a milkshake, as if everything were normal, as if she were picking me up from soccer practice, as if nobody had spent the night wondering whether something terrible had happened to her child. The manager immediately contacted Child Protective Services. Mom couldn't understand why everyone was upset. "He likes it here. He's independent. Kids need freedom." The social worker listened quietly, writing notes, asking questions, watching. The more Mom talked, the worse things became. Eventually, the truth came out. The meetings never existed. The work emergencies never existed. The scheduling conflicts never existed. She was spending weekends with a married man. A man who couldn't be seen publicly with her. A man whose wife believed he was traveling for business. While I wandered a shopping mall alone, they spent weekends at his lake house, taking boat rides, going to restaurants, watching sunsets, living a completely different life. The discovery shattered our family. I moved in with my grandparents that summer. For the first time in years, someone asked where I was before dinner. For the first time in years, someone noticed if I seemed sad. My grandfather started picking me up from school. My grandmother packed lunches with handwritten notes inside. Simple things, normal things. Things I didn't realize I had been missing. Mom was ordered into therapy. Supervised visitation followed. Family counseling came later. The first few sessions were awful. I barely spoke. She cried constantly. Every conversation turned into an argument. But over time, things slowly improved. Not because the damage disappeared, because she finally stopped defending herself. For the first time, she started listening. Years passed. I graduated high school, started college, got a job, built a life. My relationship with Mom became complicated. Not broken, not perfect. Something in between. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days were good, some weren't. Then last week something happened. We were having coffee together, talking about ordinary things. Work, life, bills, nothing important. Suddenly she looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." I waited, because I'd heard apologies before. But this time was different. No excuses followed. No explanations. No blame. Just silence. Then, I got so caught up in what I needed, her voice cracked, that I forgot what you needed. For a moment neither of us spoke, and for the first time, I believed she truly understood. Not what she had done, but what it had cost. I still keep Mateo's old business card in my wallet. The edges are worn now. He's not a college student anymore. He manages 3 stores. Every Christmas we exchange messages. Every birthday, Mr. Ram N still sends me a card, without fail. 20 years old now, and he still remembers. My mother never says much when those cards arrive. She just places them on the refrigerator, then quietly walks away. Maybe because she knows something I know too. Those strangers saw me when she didn't. They worried when she wouldn't. They protected me when she couldn't. For a long time, I thought this story was about bad parenting, about abandonment, about betrayal. But as I've gotten older, I've realized it's also about something else. It's about the people who step up when they don't have to, a security guard who refused to ignore a lonely kid, a GameStop employee who made sure that kid had somewhere safe to spend his afternoons, a mall manager who cared enough to ask difficult questions, people who had no obligation to love me, yet chose kindness anyway. That's the thing about family. It isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who notice you're sitting alone and decide to pull up a chair.